The city of Chicago will spend a sum of $8.6 million to fund Shotspotter technology for a final 9 months before the program's suspension in the city. The Chicago Sun-Times reports that last-minute negotiations to extend the program led to a 9-month contract that's costing taxpayers 5% more than the previous 12 months of the program. Mayor Brandon Johnson followed through on his campaign promise to suspend Chicago police's use of the controversial technology, which advocates say is costly, inaccurate, and unfairly targets communities of color. Northwestern University, the School of Law, published some research where a whopping 89% of Chicago police deployments prompted by ShotSpotter turned up no gun-related crime, and 86% led to no report of any crime at all.
Police advocates, on the other hand, say ShotSpotter is a necessary and helpful tool for Chicago cops who last year dealt with 617 murders and over 2,000 shootings. Down south, the city of Durham, North Carolina's ShotSpotter contract led to quicker responses and more arrests. A new report shows just 2 months after the city ended its contract. Per CBS 17 News, the report noted that for incidents that generated both 911 calls and ShotSpotter alerts, the likelihood of arrest or evidence collection did not increase. There was one such incident that allowed officers to get to a shooting victim more quickly, potentially saving that person's life. Durham police are advocating for the program's reinstatement. So, Jessica, I am troubled by Chicago deciding to get rid of the ShotSpotter program. I think it's an important tool to add to policing, especially as we've gotten away from stop and frisk type policing. This is an acoustic program. Basically, they put up these monitors around the city, and they can alert police when there are gunshots, and police can respond to incidents more quickly. It's particularly helpful when there's not a 911 call to go along with gunfire, which is about 80 to 90% of incidents where guns are fired in the city. Most people don't report it because it's sadly in some of the more crime-ridden neighborhoods, sort of a matter of course that you would hear gunfire, and so most people don't end up calling 911. So I'm curious about your thoughts on it, whether you support the ending of the contract or think that they should have continued the program as a tool for law enforcement to use to hopefully prevent gun violence in Chicago.
Yeah, I think a cost-benefit analysis here, which seems to have been done, shows that it's really not worth it when you're seeing over 80% of the calls that are the result of this technology, signaling that there was a gunshot and police need to arrive. 86% showing no crime at all. Over 80% showing there was, no evidence of a gun being fired. To me, when I look at the cost of the program, that's really not worth those results. So ShotSpotter's own website says that the technology costs $10,000 per square mile to initially install, and then $65,000 to $90,000 per year per square mile to maintain the technology. The Chicago Police Department's covering an area of 237 square miles. Now, Chicago's mayoral office is saying they've spent over $48 million since just 2018 on this technology, spending $8.6 million for just 9 months of this technology. That's sending police to places where crimes aren't being committed. It seems to me a bad use of police resources. And if something else happens somewhere in the city where the police are needed, but they're responding to this technology, which seems to be faulty at best, and they can't respond to where there's actually someone who really needs support or needs help from police, that's really concerning for me. So I understand why the Chicago, mayoral office is suspending the program.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like a lot of money. I think there have been cases where the police have been able to respond to shots fired more quickly and have been able to save victims' lives, which I think is a great thing. I don't know how much money you want to put on one person's life. That's a moral question that everybody has to grapple with, I guess. But I've spoken to people who have been working with this technology. I was in Suffolk County in Long Island not too long ago with the DA's office, shadowing him, and they had recently implemented it on September 6th. And they pointed out that one of the reasons why the rate of not finding a crime when they go to a gun, a spot shotter alert is so high, 80 to 90%, is that they often get people who are on scene who are covering for the alleged gunman or gunwoman. So there was a massive uptick, for example, in the number of people who were reporting fireworks in the middle of in cities in Long Island, people reporting cars backfiring. The DA sort of sarcastically pointed out to me, when is the last time you actually heard a car backfire, and why are we getting dozens of these reports when we show up to investigate a potential gunfire incident based on the ShotSpotter acoustic data? And ultimately, the technology, despite these potential roadblocks, ended up being very useful for them. They were able to identify 50% more potential shootings. There were 102 total incidents with a possible 222 rounds fired, including 67 incidents with one single shot, and then the rest with multiple shots fired. And they point out that it helps in the course of police work too, because when they get on scene, when this gun has been fired, they can either recover casings that could be tested to find if they were used in the commission of other crimes, which has happened in some cases, where they discovered that a shooter who was at this scene, they get alerted to it from ShotSpotter, they collect the casings, they're able to match it to a previous murder or manslaughter or shooting. And they also can pool license plates in the area for, let's say, 20 minutes before the shots were fired to 20 minutes after, and find out who was responsible for the incident. So I think, the benefits of this are tangible, they're real. Chicago, unfortunately, because of Mayor Brandon Johnson's campaign promise to get rid of this, waited so long to negotiate how much the city was supposed to be paying for it, that it ended up becoming more expensive, which was a shame. I think if he had just gone ahead and renewed it when the contract was up, then they could have gotten a more reasonable price than what they're paying now.
Right, yeah, spending $9 million a year for technology that's sending police to locations where 86% of the time the crime's not being committed at all. It seems like way too much money to be spent, that money should go towards schooling. It can go towards, more officers in the neighborhoods. If that's really, what people are worried about, is that the one thing that this benefits is the response time in the case that someone is shot. Hiring more officers is something that $9 million a year could go towards. But I think a lot of people really want investment in community, especially when you're considering the fact that there are possibly other dangerous situations happening where a police presence would benefit the people of Chicago. And instead having officers responding to these situations where there's nothing going on, there's also a risk there. And it's hard to consider when we look at the few scenarios where there are examples where someone's life was perhaps saved because of the short response time, thanks to ShotSpotters. Is someone's life valued at $9 million? I think a lot of people would grapple with that moral question. But we also have this impossible calculation to make of what's the cost of police officers spending so much time responding to calls that are actually nothing? Are they not responding to other calls that are something? But that's not something we see reflected in the data. But we also have Cleveland and Seattle, which have tested out ShotSpotters and have also done away with the technology. The researcher on this Northwestern, paper that came out in 2021 by their School of Law, Jonathan Maines, just said it seems the technology just doesn't do what it promises to do. That's not to say they can't, hone in it and work on it in the places where it's successful, like Durham, and then deploy the technology with the promise that they've made the necessary improvements.
Yeah, we're running out of time, and I'll allow you to respond to this, but I was also troubled by Mayor Brandon Johnson's explanation for why he was getting rid of ShotSpotters. I think your assessment of the cost-benefit analysis is much more reasonable than what he and some other people in Chicago are saying, which is that they have a problem with it because they feel it targets Black and brown communities. And my response to that, or my reaction to that, would be, this is an acoustic technology. It obviously can't tell the race of the person who's firing the gun. And so I never understood that particular criticism of ShotSpotter, but I mean, maybe you have a different take on it. Why don't you tell us what you think on that?
Yeah, it seems to me from his anecdotes that it's about the location of ShotSpotters. It's not covering every square mile of Chicago's police's jurisdiction. which, as I said earlier, 237 square miles. That's huge. ShotSpotters cost, according to their website, being $65,000 to $90,000 a year, very expensive. That would be over $15.4 million annually. For the Chicago Police Department, saying they're only spending, $9 million a year does prove, what the mayor has said in previous statements, which is that the technology is not deployed at every neighborhood. So having it in some neighborhoods that are predominantly brown and black, but not others, I think is where that comes from.
Yeah, I guess my pushback on him making that argument would be that it would make sense to have the ShotSpotter acoustic technology in neighborhoods where gun crime is higher. And unfortunately, it happens to be the case sometimes that is in majority black and brown neighborhoods. That's going to do it for us this week. Jess, as always, a pleasure spending Rising Fridays with you.
We've done it again, Amber. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Another one in the books. We'll be back next week. And be sure to please like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Bye, y'all.